Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Gaming News, where we discuss everything and anything within the video gaming industry. Now, before I get to that, I want to apologize that the last few weeks I have not done any videos whatsoever for Patreon. And part of that is because there's a lot of things going on in my home city that has become very public knowledge, and a lot of people have been checking in on myself and other members of Ottawa because of the Freedom Convoy that continues to plague operations here in the city, and because I am relatively close to the hot zone, at least close enough to be concerned based on some of the allegations and reports that I had been reading and seeing online. I was in no position to deal with certain things when it came to content creation, nor was I really able to do any streaming during that time as well. So I apologize for not covering the last couple of weeks of gaming news, but that is part of some of the issues that have happened in the last couple of weeks as to why I haven't been very talkative. That said, I have a couple of things that I would like to talk about that have happened just in this past week, and I'm not really going to cover some of the issues that have happened over the course of the last month because obviously all of that has been discussed. And if there are any particular topics that you want me to dive deeper into that were part of the last few weeks that I was not able to talk about, please let me know in Discord, and I have no problems doing another couple of videos discussing things that have already happened in the gaming industry. So, with that, we're just going to go forward with Cyberpunk, incidentally. And Cyberpunk is in this very interesting state where a couple of things are going on. Obviously, a lot of people were waiting for more patches and the ability to play the game on their next gen consoles, assuming that they have them. And we have sort of other news to coincide with the news about the updates to Cyberpunk specifically. So, with that, we're going to jump into the first article from GameSpot. Former Cyberpunk 2077 and Witcher 3 developers form Rebel Wolf Studio, and they are developing a new game. So, the developers who previously worked on Cyberpunk 2077 and The Witcher 3 have created this new studio to work on a dark fantasy game that will be built in Unreal 5 and the glorious engine there. And since this is their first title of this unnamed project, it's going to be part of a saga, and the main narrative director and main writer said, in order to create truly great games, we won't chase trends or numbers. Our goal is clearly defined to create memorable games, tell moving stories, and evoke visceral emotions. It's ambitious, true, and I'm glad it is. Art needs ambition. I don't want to create another game. I want to work on titles people will remember. So, the article continues to say that another key part of Rebel Wolf's identity is in its commitment to put the needs of its employees first, as the studio wants to create games on its own terms, but not at the cost of burning out its staff. Rebel Wolves will be based in Warsaw, Poland, much like CD Projekt, and its first game will be released on PC and console. More details will be revealed in time, but for now, you can get a feel for what Rebel Wolves is working on by checking out this piece of concept art, which is this beautiful piece right here. And it really does seem to have that medieval sort of RPG feel. And I'm very curious to see if they decide to go with an MMO or if they go with a single player sort of story base, or even if It's going to be a little more RTS sort of RPG. So, I mean, just because we know that it's going to be an RPG does not mean that it's restricted to only being that. There are a number of companies that have come out with hybrid games that combine some of the traits of a certain type of game with another set of traits with another set of games. And sometimes it works incredibly well and other times it doesn't. So if they're going to stand out as a new studio and that they want something that's really going to sort of hit home, they're going to have to find a unique way to do that. And so that leaves the door open to it being a couple of different types of things when it comes to RPGs and where you can go with that. So I'm excited to see what's going to become of this. Obviously, it's going to take some time in terms of development and whatnot, but they've already got the name, which means they've already got the branding. And if they already have some concept art going on, I imagine that the narrative director and main writer has got some really good ideas, and I'm just very curious to see what kind of RPG this is going to end up being, and if they're going to stick true to what they have just said, where they don't want to have employees crunch. As you may be aware, CD Projekt Red was hit with allegations of crunch, much like most AAA companies, but there's still a lot to be said for the various issues within the gaming industry with that. And if they came from an environment where there was a lot of crunch time and they want to focus on actually doing something right by their employees, then hopefully they will stick true to this narrative. And hopefully we'll have an incredible RPG that will come out in the next couple of years. So this will be very interesting. But since we are talking about former developers that worked on Cyberpunk and on The Witcher, Cyberpunk had their massive patch drop. And I want to cover a couple of key things in this because I'm actually incredibly excited about some of these different aspects that they're including in the game and things that they have changed and some things that I'm kind of dreading. So, the 1.5 patch is already out and I've already updated. It was a complete 40 gigs worth of stuff, and this list is extensive, but notably, we now can rent various different apartments for different price points. And you're also going to be able to customize your starting apartment that you have for 10 grand, which I'm really excited for. I really want to see what kind of customization options we get for the apartment. So I hope that there will be more expansion in this in the future if they want Cyberpunk to be a full, living, breathing game that they expect people to play for a long time. I feel like giving players options out of their apartment is really going to help boost some of that playability. We've also now got some appearance customization, so you can tweak your hair, makeup, piercings when you're using the mirror in any of your apartments and your safe houses. And it's free, so you can do it as often as you like, which is fantastic. And there are now more makeup options, more hair color options, so I'm really excited to see those changes. And then, of course, they've changed a lot with the crowd and the driving models. There's a new burnout mode, so I'm excited. Apparently, motorcycles have been improved, and since I pretty much exclusively ride around on my motorbike, I'm really curious to see how they've changed that because the motorbike I ride, I'm actually very comfortable with for the most part. So there's vehicle traffic improvements, which I'm kind of excited about. There's a lot of balance options, cyberware that is there, a lot of combat fixes, quick hacking, a bunch of NPCs. Perks, the reason why I wanted to highlight this is because they've rebalanced a bunch of perks and moved some of them from certain skill trees into other ones. And as a result, the perks that you have assigned for your character were reset for free, which means you have to now respec your character before you do anything. They've redesigned Blood Swell, Human Shield, Epimorphosis, Cold Blood, Coldest Blood, and Cutthroat. Weapon changes, a bunch of UI changes, so they've redesigned the skip time interface, making it easier to predict. They've updated some of the graphics, they've improved readability and notifications and pop-ups. There's now a new notification with the song's name when it starts playing on the radio, which is great. I'm excited for that. Adjusted the crosshair for knife throwing if that is something that you've decided to do. Of course, a bunch more fixes with respect to quests. And in terms of the open world stuff, when they've added a few more quests and gigs and things that you can do, but most notably, you now have standing with the various fixers in Night City. So the better that you do with some of those jobs, if you have optional portions of those quests and you completed them successfully or did them in the way that the fixer wanted them, then I assume that increases your standing with them. And new fixer gigs will appear gradually in sets as your standing increases, and a fixer will offer you another set of gigs only after the previous set is completed in a given district. So completing all the gigs for a fixer will earn you a special reward, excluding Mr. Hands. Sorry, he just doesn't like you, Choom. So to see the progress of your standing with a fixer, hover over their icon on the map screen and check the completed gigs. And something to note about that as well is they did talk a bit about how they've changed some of the things on the map so that things are a little bit easier to see and deal with. And I am excited to see what this now looks like. And supposedly, because of all of these fixes and because of how much better the game is overall, a lot of people have now actually started to experience Cyberpunk 2077 for the first time. And I am incredibly excited because the game is fantastic. It has a lot to say if you're looking at the various different themes and ideas behind it. If you look past the surface, there's a lot going on in this game, and it is really well done. So, I believe we've reached that point, and I hope that people do give it an honest try this time and ignore some of the previous issues that have happened and try to experience the game for what it truly was meant to be on launch, even though they decided to release it too early. So that's what I have to say for all of that. Next, I want to talk about Destiny 2. Now, those of you that may not be familiar, the Witch Queen is dropping on Tuesday. And a lot of people are really excited. It has the highest amount of pre orders in history that I know of for any expansion, at least in terms of Destiny 2's history, especially based on some of the previous expansions and how they just didn't live up to the initial launch of the game's hype. And Forsaken changed a lot of things, and now we have Witch Queen less than a week away, and I can't be more excited because not only are we going to get some new elements, we finally get to experience a new world and new ways to do things, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that's being taken out of the game. However, they also did an incredible overhaul of one of the most unique modes that Destiny 2 has, which is Gambit. Now I know there's a lot of people who are not big fans of Gambit. I happen to be a huge fan of Gambit because it offers the ability to do sort of PvE objectives with a smaller sort of PvP component, and it's actually very interesting. And when it first launched, we had Gambit, and then we had sort of like the Season of the Reckoner where we had Gambit Prime. And over time, what Bungie decided to do was change the main Gambit mode. After they took out Gambit Prime, they changed the main Gambit mode from 3 matches to solidify a win to 1 match that was shorter and hopefully better. And since then, Gambit hasn't really seen any kind of update or overhaul or changes or anything. There has been more focus on the story and the seasonal content, and there has been some focus on trials and on some of the PvP, although PvP people will tell me that Crucible is still not great. But they decided to do some smaller changes. It's still going to be 1 round. It's not a complete overhaul. But what they have done is now added a freelance note so that you're not going to be mopped the floor with by a whole team that is incredibly good at Gambit. They've also added new respawn points, which will allow people to get back into the fight more often instead of spawning at the front of the map and having to go all the way across to the other end and missing out on a lot of the action or getting spawn camped. Now you're going to be able to spawn in different places so that you can be more effective working with your team. Also, invaders will have new spawn points so that when they're coming into your map, it's not going to be as easy to predict where those invaders are. And I feel like that is something that was missing because in Crucible you can spawn in different spots based on sort of the flow of the match. But in Gambit, it was always you spawned at the front. And that made it incredibly easy for an invader to just trap you guys in your front section, and if you're on the primeval, you're screwed. They also made a couple of other very interesting changes to how blockers function to accommodate the rest of the game and the inclusion of stasis and the darkness into the game, while strikes have a bunch of the enemies now throwing stasis at you or something like that. Now you're going to have the same thing happen in Gambit. So if you bank 10 motes, a flanks blocker will be getting a health boost, and the guardians who go for broke by banking 15 motes will send a knight that is now equipped with stasis energy offense, and a mote draining by multiple blockers can be interrupted by attacking the taken enemies in the central area. And this is going to make the game feel a little more dynamic than just sort of sit there and burn, because that's often what a lot of groups do. Furthermore, they've added ammo chests containing special and heavy ammo that will be readily available when completing a front and can be looted once by each player, but they expire after 20 seconds of being on the field. So you have to be quick to go and get those ammo drops. And I do like that they've made it so that the whole team gets the ammo drop instead of just one person getting all of the ammo or it being disproportionate or a person stealing heavy to go invade when another person was going to go invade the other side. Also, the other ammo brick changes include heavy brick spawning for each player when a high value target has been eliminated, which incentivizes going after those high value targets. An ammo chest will spawn in one of the fronts every 60 seconds during the primeval phase. And this is going to coincide with the next bit, which is the envoys that shield the primeval will spawn in the fronts and have varied elemental shields. forcing players to not just camp at the front and take out the primeval and decimate the envoys very quickly and just making it to who is faster at killing the thing. Now it forces players to go to different areas of the map to take out those envoys to get that damage multiplier. And those envoys do have reduced health, but they're no longer affected by the Slayer stacks that you were picking up before. So it's only going to apply to the Primeval itself. And the envoys, they're only going to spawn a maximum of 5 times in any given match during the damage dealing phase of the Primeval, so it balances itself out. So then invasions needed to be tweaked a tiny bit as well. Instead of dominating how the match is going to go, they have decided that level advantage will still be disabled for invader PvP. Invasions are now going to trigger at 40 and 80 instead of 25, 50, and 75 moat thresholds. Now you only get 2 chances, and invader kills will heal the primeval for exactly 27% of its health every time, instead of it being somewhere between 3% and like 30 something percent, I believe I read somewhere. Also, on that note, you can no longer bank or hold on to your invader portal. So if you procced the invader portal and then you banked enough motes to proc the invader portal a second time, technically you still have 2 invades on the opposing team. So often what would happen in matches is that people would invade and then get slaughtered or whatever, and then they would send their teammate to go and invade immediately after that, making teams wonder what the heck is happening. So these are all really good changes, in my opinion. I feel like it's going to rectify the whole idea of Gambit and make it more exciting for people and make it more on par with Crucible, so that people just feel like it's more interesting to go into. And I'm excited to see a lot of these changes when the Witch Queen drops, but I don't know how it's going to work out. So I'm gonna definitely give some feedback when Witch Queen drops. I'm definitely gonna try some Gambit and see how it feels. But right now, we just don't know until those changes are implemented. However, we're not done with Destiny news yet. I wanted to talk quickly about something that just amused the crap out of me, and that was uh, poor Paul Tassi on Twitter had a fun week. Had a fun week. We did the final mission, and by the way, spoilers, if you haven't done the mission, stop listening right now. If you don't care, keep listening. But we finally let Savathun loose, and she kept true to her promise of giving us back Osiris. And if you don't know what any of that means, don't worry, it'll all make sense later. I'll try and give you a wrap up video. But Paul Tassi wrote this article. Destiny 2's escaped Savathun is now roasting players on Twitter, myself included. And this was a glorious thing where now that Savathun is out and about, she has taken over the Destiny 2's Twitter and roasting people. So, among some of the favorites are I've killed gods with a handful of bullets and popcorn. You're just next on the list. And Savathun says, what is full of unquenchable light while remaining completely in the dark? And you can just hear the voice, by the way, when you do these. So Xbox, not bad for your first tweet. And then Savathun, being flawless is only difficult when you are flawed. The roasting that has been happening is amazing. Did you kill Osiris? I left behind nothing of value, only some ragged scraps shaped like a man, but I'm sure you'll piece him together again. Beautiful. Just absolutely beautiful. So Destiny had said something about Lulu and lemons, and Paul Tassi responded to that with Savathun. No one in history has ever used the word Lulu outside of the context of lemons. And then Savathun responds with, it's so good to stand and stretch, run my fingers through the grass. You should give it a try. So, this is Savathun speak for telling me to touch grass, and I still have not recovered from this utter devastation. So, he was then speculating. I believe it was the narrative team who did this before during a Keitel takeover on Twitter during the season of The Chosen. Keitel also responded to me back then, but not with such utter brute force. Despite Savathun's online savagery, I maintain my theory that we will probably end the Witch Queen not killing her and having her become a future ally our coming larger fights against the darkness. All the signs are there that her end goal is not our annihilation, and as recently as her exorcism, even there she kept her word and returned Osiris to us alive. And I think I agree with this. I don't believe that the end of the Witch Queen is going to be us killing Savathun with the direction everything has been. It would be too ridiculous and sad that all of this time they have building straight up to Savathun taking over, and it it would just not work if she has done all of this taking over and implemented all of these plans for us to suddenly just be able to kill her. I feel like she is going to be on the run if we do manage to do enough damage, but I don't know. I'm not part of the narrative team, as awesome as that would be. So, I have to say, this was a very entertaining article and thing to witness on Twitter, and I just wanted to talk about it because it was really amusing. Next up, I'd like to talk about the gaming industry. So, the gaming industry is in a very strange place right now where we've got a lot of allegations going on. There's still work to be done in terms of diversity, inclusion, pay equity, etc. And this has been very much a talking point over several years worth of being in the gaming industry and even years prior to that. And Jeffrey Rousseau for Game Industry Biz wrote a very interesting article that I wanted to cover a couple of points before leading into the next topic because there is kind of a jump off point from this article to that. So, the title is How Much Progress Has the Industry Made on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion? DEI consultants and professionals weigh in on the promises made in 2020 while looking ahead. So, this is actually a long article that I encourage everyone to read in full. I'm only going to cover a couple of quotes and things out of this article before jumping on to the next topic. But I encourage you to read the whole thing because it is really interesting to see the statistics for this particular topic. So, he begins with the good news is the gaming industry has been making progress on issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. However, that progress has been slow and particularly so for Black professionals. So he goes into some statistics about the Washington Post article. The AGDA's 2021 developer survey report said the group has doubled in 16 years to account for 4% of the industry. But if you're looking at the census through like North America and Canada, the numbers are drastically different. And he then goes on to ask questions of certain people within the community that would be able to speak to this particular topic. So the question is the industry making progress on the DEI front? And Regis Marshall, head of diversity and inclusion at Iron Galaxy, said overall progress is being made when conversations are taking place, when BIPOC folk are speaking out about their experiences and setting boundaries. When speaking about the headway that has been made, Cinzia Musio, Diversity and Inclusion Advisor at Splash Damage, notes that the media's broader coverage of company problems and allegations has shifted. While progress is always slow, it is clear to see that the games industry is moving in the right direction. It was encouraging to see that late last year, with new allegations of abuse and harassment in the industry, there was a real drive across the board to create accountability. From games media refusing to publish any articles without mentioning history of abuse and harassment to major platform holders calling out the behavior. The next few years will be key to see whether that accountability continues and whether it turns into real action across large studios. The next question is, has the industry followed through? So, Dr. Kishona Gray, author of Intersectional Tech, Black Users in Digital Gaming, and an associate professor at the University of Kentucky, questions if companies are working on efforts that are both front facing to the public and internally. Gray says we can point to specific things from companies and point out what they're not doing that well. Conversations related to unionization, harassment, hiring, etc. We have to ask more questions to understand what a company needs to be doing right now, and it's different across companies. So, Twitch DEI might be different than Discord, and of course, Microsoft has completely shifted the conversation with its recent acquisition. Now, of course, in this particular case, we are talking about Activision Blizzard, and we would not be gaming news if we didn't cover Activision Blizzard continuing over the course of the last several months. We have gone at length to discuss this, and this is where my jump off point is, because Microsoft recently bought Activision Blizzard. And part of the deal is that the contract that Bobby Kotick has will run out in 2023. At that point, it's assumed that he will no longer maintain his position as CEO of Activision, and Microsoft will run forward with the IPs. But they still have to deal with some of the fallout that Activision Blizzard has had to deal with over the last few months. So, this brings us to this Polygon article, which is Activision Blizzard accused of union busting as Raven QA union hearing continues. So I'm going to cover some of this. Activision, Blizzard, and Raven Software QA workers are looking to define employees eligible for Game Workers Alliance, the union group formed in January with the assistance of Communication Workers of America. The National Labor Review Board hearing began Wednesday and continued into Thursday. Union representatives have raised concerns about whether Activision Blizzard's various responses to employees' unionization efforts constitute union busting. And if you remember previously, we have talked about how they hired on Wilmer Hale to be a law firm that it was supposedly neutral and third party that would be helpful for a lot of the employees that were dealing with a lot of these allegations and whatnot, and then found that Wilmer Hale also ended up working with Amazon years before, and Amazon is also known to be incredibly anti union. So the fact that people are now trying to begin their own unions to protect the employees, and the fact that Activision Blizzard seems to be trying to shut those efforts down, this is how all of this sort of started. So the hearing was forced in late January after Activision Blizzard denied Game Workers Alliance request for voluntary recognition of the union. The purpose of the hearing is to define which employees can be included in the unit, as well as determine who can vote for or against the union. From the hearing, Activision Blizzard and Game Workers Alliance will also set a date for the vote. So, one of the complicated issues outlined during the hearing concerns Activision Blizzard's reorganization of its QA staff following the announcement of the Game Workers Alliance. That reorganization embeds the QA team into different teams across the company, like art, design, engineering, and audio, Activision had said back in January. So, though the embedded QA is considered a positive adjustment for a video game studio, since its aim is to better include QA workers in the development process, the timing of Activision Blizzard's reorganization raised questions among staff regarding whether their union was being intentionally split up. In January, CWA organizing director Tom Smith called the move nothing more than a tactic to thwart Raven QA workers who are exercising their right to organize. As you can see, the issues continue to spiral for Activision Blizzard, and the fact that Microsoft has purchased Activision Blizzard, presumably to have and save the IPs. There's still a lot of work to be done, and it's still an upward battle. So I definitely encourage all of you to continue to read the rest of that article if you're more interested in what is being said about the union. I do hope that they're able to put together their union to save the workers, but I don't actually know. But of course, it doesn't just stop there. Game Industry Biz wrote an article. The SEC widens investigation into Activision Blizzard misconduct handling. So, the federal investigators have widened a probe into how Activision Blizzard's leadership dealt with misconduct claims at the firm, according to a report from the Wall Street Journal. They report that the Securities and Exchange Commission has subpoenaed multiple company directors to find more information regarding the company's response to workplace issues. Additionally, California's Department of Fair Employment and Housing, which filed suit against the publisher last year, has now subpoenaed multiple police departments in Los Angeles for any records relating to Bobby Kotick, as well as 18 other current and former employees. The recent subpoena to Activision employees is dated January 18th, the same day that Microsoft announced its intention to acquire the publisher for $68.7 billion. The subpoena to the Los Angeles Police Department is dated January 20th. Activision has responded to the SEC's police probe. Spokesperson Helene Klasky said that the subpoenas are an extraordinary fishing expedition, adding that they were calculated to harass, annoy, and embarrass rather than serve any legitimate purpose. Last September, the SEC launched its investigation into the company to determine whether the firm should have informed investors about the misconduct investigations it was facing at the time. The first of these investigations came to light as part of a lawsuit filed by the DFEH last July. So, it continues. And it just seems to be mounting issues. Never mind the fact that I've also seen an article very recently published that Bobby Kotick has also funded certain people politically through a secret company that people didn't know about until the news post went up either yesterday or today. And that just goes to show you that even though all of these issues have been occurring, even though there will be some form of settlement, if Bobby Kotick has to pay a bunch of money. He's already moved and sheltered himself in a lot of ways. And this is why I always said firing Bobby Kotick is not going to be the solution to this problem. It's going to take a lot of work. It's definitely going to continue to be an uphill battle. And I can only hope that Microsoft will be able to salvage the games, the IPs that people absolutely love, and just have it completely removed from the bad apples in the industry. But as we talked about in the previous article, the other game industry biz, that there is improvement when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion in these spaces, and hopefully there will be less of these allegations moving forward. But there are a lot of AAA companies that are on the hook because they have been outed for having a lot of these awful allegations put against them. So this is not going to stop here. It's not going to stop anytime soon. And we have to find out whether or not these lawsuits are going to come to some sort of conclusion before the gaming industry can really start to heal. So, I know that was super long. I apologize that I haven't been able to deal with doing gaming news over the last few weeks, but I felt like now was a good time to come back and give you guys something more concrete. And if you have any thoughts, comments, concerns, questions, ideas for the next one, let me know in Discord. The link will be in the description below, along with all of these articles will be linked as well for you to read at your leisure. And with that, thank you so much for being part of the Patreon. I appreciate all of your faces, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.